The moment you hear it spoken aloud, you almost stop mid-sentence. A price so small, it sounds like a mistake or a joke told too quietly. Yet it was real, and once it was perfectly normal. We remember hearing those numbers without surprise because they fit the rhythm of everyday life. Today, they feel imaginary, like figures from a storybook rather than lived experience. This is where our journey begins, not with grand events, but with ordinary prices that quietly shaped how we shopped, traveled, and planned our days. Stay with me, because what comes next may surprise you gently. Money once felt physical, in a way that's hard to explain today. Coins sat heavy in pockets, warming as you walked, each one familiar by touch alone. You didn't need to check a screen or do mental arithmetic. Prices were learned through repetition, not calculation. Handwritten cards hung in shop windows, slightly crooked, their numbers trusted without question. At the counter, change made a soft, unmistakable sound as it was counted out carefully, never rushed. You knew what things cost because you'd paid for them the same way every week. The weekly shop followed a rhythm, almost musical, guided by habit and memory. Today, prices flicker and change, numbers floating past us without weight or permanence. Back then, money stayed still long enough to be understood. It lived in drawers, purses, and palms, shaping choices quietly. That familiarity created confidence, a sense of control rooted in routine. And it's that everyday certainty, more than the numbers themselves, that makes those old prices linger so vividly in our minds. It was less about wealth and more about knowing where you stood, week to week, coin by coin, in a world that moved at a steadier pace that rarely hurried you along. The smallest purchases often mattered the most. A bus fare dropped into a conductor's hand, a folded newspaper bought on the way to work, a few coins saved for childhood novelty sweets after school. These weren't treats in the modern sense, they were gentle markers of routine. You thought twice, not because money was scarce, but because prices carried meaning. Children learned value early, counting coins for exercise books or pencils, understanding that choices mattered. Today, many of these moments have vanished into contactless taps and silent screens. Back then, each small purchase asked a quiet question: do I need this now or later? Most people today never experienced money this way, where every coin told a story and every decision felt tangible. Those little transactions stitched days together, shaping habits, patience, and priorities. And as simple as they seem now, they formed the foundations of how people understood money, responsibility, and independence long before they ever earned a full wage. It was ordinary, memorable, quietly powerful in its simplicity. The weekly shop was less an errand and more a ritual. Paper bags were filled slowly, item by item, as familiar faces exchanged nods across the counter. You knew what bread should cost, what a joint of meat was worth, and if a number seemed wrong, it felt personal. Prices were not suggestions. They were quiet agreements built on trust. Shopkeepers knew their customers, and customers knew the prices by heart. That familiarity shaped careful choices. You bought what you needed, adjusted when required, and felt reassured by the consistency. Today, shops are brighter, faster, and often anonymous, with prices that shift without explanation. Back then, routine brought comfort. Budgeting wasn't a spreadsheet. It was instinct, learned over years of repetition. Those weekly journeys along the high street grounded households in predictability, and as we look closer, it becomes clear that these simple habits taught a deeper lesson about stability, one that echoed far beyond the shopping bag. That sense of certainty shaped family life in ways rarely discussed today. There was a time when wages, prices, and everyday life seemed to speak the same language. You knew roughly what came in each week, and just as importantly, you knew what would go out. Rent, food, transport, small pleasures all fitted together with a logic that felt steady. People planned because prices allowed planning. They saved gradually, waited patiently, and adjusted expectations without feeling constantly wrong-footed. It wasn't that everything was cheaper, it was that everything was predictable. Today, prices shift suddenly, often without warning, leaving people guessing and recalculating. Back then, consistency built confidence. Households learned to stretch, manage, and prepare because the ground beneath them rarely moved. That connection between earnings and costs gave daily life a sense of balance. You could look ahead a little, breathe a little easier. And that quiet reassurance shaped attitudes toward work, spending, and security, laying emotional foundations that many still carry with them today, even as the world around them feels far less settled. Ask anyone of a certain age, and those old prices surface instantly, without effort. There, recalled with clarity because they were never just numbers. They were markers of time, woven into routines that gave days their shape. Knowing what something cost meant knowing how the week would unfold. That knowledge brought reassurance, even pride. It isn't nostalgia for difficulty or doing without. It's nostalgia for balance, for understanding how things fitted together. Today, prices rush past us, updated, adjusted, explained away. Back then, they settled in and stayed long enough to become familiar. Families shared that knowledge, neighbors compared notes, and everyone spoke the same language of value. Those figures stay with us because they remind us who we were at moments of life. They connect memory to place, to age, to people gone. And in remembering them, we aren't longing for the past, but recognizing what gave it rhythm. The shock often comes when we say those old prices aloud today. They hang in the air, unbelievable, almost embarrassing in their smallness. Modern prices feel detached, changing between one visit and the next, rarely settling long enough to be known. We scroll, tap, and accept, seldom pausing to remember what certainty once felt like. Looking back isn't about wishing time away, it's about noticing what has shifted quietly beneath our feet. So before we move on, take a moment. What everyday price from your past still feels impossible today?